From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. It's great to be with all of y'all this morning. And if you're stressed out because guess what yesterday was? Patch Tuesday. I completely understand. I recommend a cigar, a thing of scotch, because for some awkward reason, every single company on the planet that sells software or hardware decided that the second Tuesday of every month is a great day to release all of your vulnerabilities and all of your patches. Because what else do we have to do outside of putting out fires for pretty much every single day in our roles than have one day where we get a whole barrel full? Patch Tuesday equals rollback Wednesday equals blue screens of death on Friday. I don't know. We'll figure out that formula. I'm working on it. But thank you all for tuning in. Packed show. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we do, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at NIST Security. You'll hear more from them during the show, by the way. And I've got my double espresso, coffee cup. Cheers. Let's get the ball rolling. All right. Microsoft, for their end, released and addressed 90 different vulnerabilities across Windows and different OS components, raised eyebrows when it marked half a dozen flaws in their actively exploited category. These are 6 newly patched 0 days. Those CVEs is 2024. All of them are 2024. So 38178, which is a memory corruption vulnerabilities in the Windows scripting engine that allows for remote code execution attacks if an authenticated client is tricked into clicking a link in order for an unauthenticated attacker to initiate remote code execution. According to Microsoft, successful exploitation of the vulnerability requires an attacker to first prepare the target so that it uses Edge in Internet Explorer mode. This has a 7.5 CVSS score. CVE 2024-38189er is a remote code execution flaw in the Microsoft project. It's been exploited via maliciously rigged Microsoft Office project files on systems where the block macros from running in Office files from the Internet policy is disabled and VBA macro notifications are not enabled, allowing an attacker to perform remote code execution. This has a CVSS of 8.8. CVE 2024-38107 is a privilege escalation flaws in the Windows Power Dependency Coordinator. It's rated important. It has a CVSS score of 7.8. An attacker who successfully exploits this vulnerability could gain system privileges. CVE 2024-38106 exploitation has been detected targeting the Windows kernel elevation of privilege flaws. This carries a CVSS score of 7.0. Successful exploitation requires an attacker to win a race condition. An attacker who successfully exploits this vulnerability could gain system privileges. CVE 2024-38213 Microsoft describes as a Windows mark of the web security feature bypass. It's being exploited in active attacks. An attacker who successfully exploited this vulnerability could bypass the smart screen user experience. And finally, CVE 2024-38193, an elevation of privilege security defect in the Windows ancillary function driver for WinSock is being exploited in the wild. The technical details and IOCs are not yet available for this one. There's also a major flaw in the Windows Reliable Multicast Transport Driver. That's the RMcast that brings remote code execution risks. This has a CVSS score of 9.8. A Windows TCP/IP remote code execution flaw has a CVSS score of 9.8. And 2 separate remote code execution issues in the Windows Network Virtualization and an information disclosure in the Azure Health Bot has a 9.1 CVSS. So if you're a Microsoft shop this morning, welcome to the reality. Get ready to patch. Chip makers Intel and AMD also each informed their customers about dozens of vulnerabilities found and patched in their products. So Intel published 43 new advisories. They cover a total of roughly 70 different security holes. 9 advisories describe high severity vulnerabilities. They impact the Intel Core Ultra and other processors, the SMI transfer monitor, Agilex FPGA firmware, the TDX system, Nuke BIOS firmware, and Ethernet controllers and adapters, and the UEFI integrator tools on AppTOV for Intel NOC and server board S2600 ST firmware. Some of these could lead to privilege escalation, information disclosure, and denial of service attacks. There's a whole bunch of medium vulnerabilities as well, and several vulnerabilities have been reserved in other aspects of Intel's wide array of solutions. AMD, for their end, published 8 new advisories informing customers of 46 different vulnerabilities. One advisory addressed research conducted by Iowa State University and Google on SMAC, which is a new attack method that can be used similar to Spectre to obtain potentially sensitive information. They haven't identified any novel vulnerabilities. There's that. Another advisory addresses research published back in January. So AMD, for their end, says, hey, we've got nothing really critical. 8, here's some of these have to do with research. SAP, for their end, released their security package for August of 2024, addressing 17 vulnerabilities, including a critical authentication bypass that could allow remote attackers to fully compromise the system. That flaw is CVE 2024-41730. It's rated 9.8 as per the CVSS version 3.1. It's a missing authentication check bug that impacts SAP Business Objects, Business Intelligence Platform versions 430 and 440, and is exploitable under certain conditions. The second critical vulnerability addressed is CVE 2024-29415. That's a server-side request forgery flaw in applications built with SAP Build Apps older than versions 4.11.130. The flaw concerns a weakness in the IP package for Node.js, which checks whether an IP address is public or private. And it exists due to an incomplete fix for similar issues from a previous CVE from last year, CVE 2023-42282. The remaining fixes is CVEs 2024-42374, and then CVE 2023-30533, and then CVE 2024-34688, and 2024-33003. SAP's urging everyone to update now. In industrial control systems, both Siemens, Schneider Electric, Rockwell Automation, Aviva have all released advisories for patching. Siemens published 9 new advisories covering roughly 50 vulnerabilities, including 30 flaws, including one rated critical and another one rated high, both found in the SYNAC network management system product. A majority of the flaws impact third-party components, and the list includes CVE 2023-44487. The vulnerability is exploited in the wild for a record-breaking /2 rapid reset DDoS attack. High severity vulnerabilities could lead to remote code execution, denial of service, information disclosure, have been patched by Siemens in the Intralog WMS, Team Center visualization, JT2Go, NX, ScaleLance M800, and SINAC traffic analyzers and Como products. Schneider Electric published 2 new advisories. One of them informs customers about the EcoStruxure Machine SCADA Expert and Blue Open Studio vulnerability introduced by an Aviva component. Aviva addressed the issue, which is exploited for privilege escalation back in January of this year. Aviva also published for their end 3 new advisories, all with a severity rating of high. They addressed the denial of service vulnerability in SweetLink servers, code execution and file manipulation and reports for operations, and SQL injection bug in Historian server. Rockwell, for their end, published 9 new advisories covering 10 different vulnerabilities impacting the company's products. The security holes have been assigned medium and high severity ratings. The list includes arbitrary code execution flaws in the A Advanced and Factory Talk products. That A Advanced reminds me of Aaron. And the denial of service flaws in compact logics, guard logics, control logics, and microcontrollers. Rockwell also patched an authentication bypass bug in data mosaics, a DLL hijacking vulnerability in Emulate 3D, and an unencrypted data issue in Pavilion 8. CISA published 10 ICS advisories, the majority covering the Rockwell automation vulnerabilities disclosed yesterday by the vendors, and then the other 2 cover the Aviva SweetLink server bug and vulnerabilities in the Ocean Data System Dream report. Fortinet and Zoom also addressed multiple vulnerabilities, including a high severity flaw leading to information disclosure and privilege escalation in Zoom products. Fortinet released patches for 3 security defects impacting FortiOS, FortiAnalyzer, FortiManager, FortiProxy, FortiPAM, and FortiSwitch Manager, including 2 medium flaws and low severity bugs. We're not going to get into these. Again, none of them are high, but you want to make sure you get them patched. Zoom, for their end, patched 15 vulnerabilities across its products, including 2 high severity issues. The most severe of the bugs tracked CV 2024-39825 impacts Zoom workplace apps for desktop and mobile devices and room clients for Windows, Mac OS, and iPad. It could allow an authenticated attacker to escalate their privileges over the network. The second high severity issue is CVE 2024-39818. It impacts the Zoom workplace applications and meeting SDK for desktop and mobile and could allow authenticated users to restrict information over the network. Again, authenticated users here, so these aren't unauthenticated attacks, which helps. Ivanti, for their end, are urging customers to patch a critical authentication bypass vulnerability that impacts their virtual traffic manager appliance. It's been assigned a CVE 2024-759-3, and it's due to an incorrect implementation of an authentication algorithms that could allow a remote unauthenticated attacker to bypass authentication on internet exposed VTM admin panels. So Avanti's asking everyone to please patch that. And if you want to limit admin access to the interface, there are some ways to do that. And all of that mitigation is available in our show notes. Go ahead and check out our Substack, jamesazar.substack.com. We have stuff dropping today there as well, so you can go check that out. And now we'll take a brief message and hear from our friends over at Nudge Security. Do you know who's experimenting with AI in your organization? Our friends over at Nudge Security have come up with a patented approach for SaaS discovery, giving you a full inventory of all apps ever introduced by anyone in your organizations, and all in minutes. This includes Gen AI applications. The best part is you don't even have to know what you're looking for. You simply do a quick one-time setup, so easy, no change management required, no browser plugins, no network proxies, no agent. Nudge Security is going to discover and categorize every SaaS and cloud account ever created by anyone in your organization. You can get a free 14-day trial today. You'll get a full list of all Gen AI apps and users. You'll get insights into their security posture, compliance certification, breach history, and more, so you can quickly vet new AI tools and guide users towards a secure alternative. Take control of Gen AI security risks today by going to nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub, nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub to start your free 14-day trial today. All right. Thank you all. Go check out Nudge Security. Definitely worth that 14-day free trial and a whole lot more. All right. So one thing about this whole Patch Tuesday thing, you've got to prioritize your patches. You've got to know what's urgent and what's not. Just because something has a CVSS score of 7.5 or 6.8 or 4.9 doesn't mean that's the same for you. You have to understand the business processes in your company. You have to understand what's critical for business function and start from there. On Zoom and Microsoft like Excel, automatic updates, get those done. Anything that's server side, you've got to prioritize. You've got to work with the teams, right? And like, look, there's no easy way of doing it, but thanks to, kind of like advances in technology, there are ways to help you prioritize. And there are tools out there to help you manage all of this. And on a day like Patch Tuesday, you need as much help as humanly possible. And so please reach out if you need help. Talk to your partners, talk to your vendors, evangelize within the company. One thing I in my current role, we don't have that big of a team and we're very much still on-prem. But one thing I did in previous roles, just kind of as an idea, is essentially every Patch Tuesday, every Tuesday afternoon of Patch Tuesday, we'd all gather for about a 45-minute call. And our vulnerability management analyst would essentially present everything that's been dropped within our environment. The teams would look at it together, and then we would start addressing it. And we would start to say, all right, what's really easy to do? What could we knock off this list? What's a 0-day? What's high? What's medium? What's low? How do we prioritize these? Which teams are responsible? Which teams are really, really overwhelmed, right? And might take longer. They could use some help. And then what's the help that we could offer them in order to expedite some of this patching? Patching requires teamwork. Remediation requires teamwork. It requires looking at the business as a whole and not just at that specific vulnerability. So that's really important to kind of take in. All right. Enough for my rant today. We still have a few more stories left. Let's go ahead and knock those out here. I know we're running over, but it is Patch Tuesday. So thank you all for sticking around. So first of all, NIST has formally published 3 post-quantum cryptography standards from the competition it held to develop cryptography able to withstand quantum computing decryption of current asymmetric encryption. No surprises, but now it's official. The 3 standards are the MLKEM, also known as Kyber, MLDSA, formerly known better as the Lithium, and SLH DSA, known as Sphinx. A fourth FNDSA, also known as Falcon, has been chosen for future standardization. Still requires some more testing. There's a lot here about kind of Shor's algorithm and so forth. I'm going to do a deep dive with this, with someone I actually know who's really, really smart on the matter. And we'll potentially try to record something today, tomorrow, and publish it on Friday. So stay tuned for that. I'm not going to deep dive into this because this is a 30-minute conversation, all of within itself. G-Core, the European cybersecurity firm, released their key takeaways for the first half of 2024, saying DDoS attacks increased by 46% compared to the same period last year, reaching 445,000 DDoS attacks in Q2 of 2024. Compared to the same data, that's an increase of 34%. Peak attack power increased slightly. Obviously, this kind of all plays in there. The peak reached 1.7 terabytes per second. By comparison, last year it was 1.6 terabytes, so not much, but still something. The most attack industries were gaming and gambling. They accounted for 49% of the attacks. And again, that's because disruption there equals direct money, and they can extort the victims to pay up in order to withstand those. Financial services, telecom, and e-commerce all followed there, as well as the tech industry. So all in all, they saw that the network layer attacks were predominantly impacting the gaming, technology, and telecom industry due to critical nature of real-time data services. The application layer attacks were significantly impacted in sectors like financial services, e-commerce, and media, disrupting transaction processing and content delivery. So you're kind of seeing the difference between the network layer and the application layer, and the need to have both there as well. Great report by G-Core there. Federal regulators and SolarWinds are considering a truce weeks after a judge dismissed most claims related to misleading investors about the company's cybersecurity practices and risks. The SEC was initially trying to essentially ban Tim Brown from ever serving as a director in any publicly traded company, as well as hold him potentially liable with a civil fine for misleading investors. It's a high-stakes game for many CISOs, including Tim Brown himself. So we'll see. This is now probably going to go into mediation. We'll see if a settlement will actually carry through. Obviously, it's very easy to be on the side that says, don't settle, fight this out, you'll probably win, Tim. But then it's his life, his name, his reputation, his family, and SolarWinds as a company as well. There's a lot at stake here. This is a significant case for many cybersecurity practitioners that are watching with very close eyes. So we'll keep you tuned as those kind of discussions begin. Delta Airlines finally reported that they suffered $380 million in revenue losses due to the outage caused by the CrowdStrike update. The airline canceled 7,000 flights in 5 days. In the aftermath, it disrupted travel for up to 1.3 million customers, and they're pursuing legal claims now against CrowdStrike and Microsoft to recover damages caused by the outage, which they say totals nearly $500 million all in all. Delta expects roughly $170 million tied to customer expense reimbursement and crew-related costs. It did report saving $50 million in fuel expenses. Well, when you don't have planes in the air, you're not being charged for fuel. So there's that. We'll see how this case continues to develop, but nonetheless, very, very interesting. That's it for our show this morning, y'all. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. Until then, and by the way, tomorrow, I've already got a story lined up on what happened at DEF CON with voting machines. Unbelievable. Don't miss tomorrow's episode. It'll be one for the books as well. That's it for the show. See you tomorrow. Till then, stay cyber safe and Godspeed in patching all of these vulnerabilities.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.